Alright, welcome back. In this one we're going to talk about the movement, but we're going to talk about movement of infantry and gun teams. So we got some impact gun teams and a gun team. And also, since the gun teams will use transportations, we'll also talk about transportations in this video. Now, one of the things I've already talked about in the previous video that I'm not going to go over in this one is about command distance. So it's the same for these guys, 246. Same for all these 246 separate vehicles. Get that extra 6 inches or extra 2 inches. And again, you can rotate these guys however you want when you move them, unless they're moving at the double. Talk about that. Moving through friendly and enemy teams, we talked about that and how infantry can change the dynamic there of vehicles, infantry. Moving near enemies, including those in a building, and we went over this building here. Got an infantry team, and it could be a gun team or something in there. An infantry team or a gun team in the building about not moving closer to 2 inches unless they can't see. And we talked about moving at the double. So one of the things I want to talk about now is we got, I'm going to move these out of the way, because we're going to talk a little bit about infantry and gun teams on the road, which are these. Only the motorcycles, jeeps, half-tracks, slow-wheeled wagons gain that movement bonus. So again, motorcycles, jeeps, half-tracks, wheeled vehicles, slow-wheeled vehicles, and wagons gain that extra bonus if they start their turn on the road and stay on the road. Everybody else, they don't get any bonus. Remember, tanks, whether cross-country, or this tank is going cross-country, or it starts and moves on the road, or it's just going to go, if it's standard tank, 12 inches. It does not get that bonus that Jeep would. 16 inches out here, 24 if it starts on the road and stays on the road, and we talked about that. So these guys will not get that bonus. This might depend upon what transport they use. So gun teams that are being towed possibly will get that bonus. So just wanted to cover that. Now we're going to start heading into some other new stuff. And one of it is, and I just want to get this down, about pinned teams, and we'll learn about pinning things in a shooting step. So this unit here is out here running around. So they're out here, and they got their commander, and they're in command distance, so they're okay. And if they get shot enough, they get what's called pinned. And so you need to put a pinned marker. Always mark what's happening to the units, if they're pinned, if they're bogged down, if they moved at double, if they got on the ground, dug in, all that stuff. You need to mark it, because there's times you will forget. Believe me. So, pinned. This is a little pinned down marker. It says pinned down. When a unit is pinned down, and while I'm going over this, because this is part of movement, and this is going to happen more to infantry, because tanks, vehicles like that, or vehicles, tanks, they're pretty much immune to being pinned down. This is something that's going to affect infantry and gun teams. So if they're pinned down, when they move, they can either move or shoot. That's it. Can't do both. Move or shoot. If they move, they cannot move any closer to any visible enemy team, or move into sight of any enemy team. So it kind of really restricts where these pinned down units can go. But fully armored and open-topped vehicles are going to be immune to that pin. Unarmored vehicles are not. So like that Jeep could get pinned down because it's unarmored. Remember those dashes. So your tanks and your half tracks. They will be immune to this pinning down, so if they get pinned down, just don't worry about it. It's going to be mainly your infantry, your gun teams, which could include those, because those are gun teams, your man-packed gun teams, and unarmored vehicles can become pinned. And we'll talk more about pinned when we get to shooting. I just want you to understand that in the movement phase, if you're pinned, can't move closer to a visible enemy, and can't move into sight of an enemy team. Okay. Now I'm going to go on to what is the normal movement rate for infantry and others. So you can go to that back of the book. Also, here on page 62 is a summary. And what we're going to look at now is this bottom part. So we looked at the top part with fully tracked and transports, other tanks and transports. Those we've already taken care of. So now we're going to move to these guys. So we got cavalry and infantry. Cavalry can go 10 inches cross country and 6 inches for infantry. Well, let me just do one time. Cavalry, 10 inches cross country. On the road, 10 inches. Remember I told you only certain vehicles get that bonus of movement. And rough terrain, you know what? They're not slowed down. They are not slowed down. And guess what else? They require no bogging check. So, I'll come back to that. Infantry can move 6 inches, 6 inches, 6 inches. No bogging check. Oh, that's interesting. Man-packed gun teams, so I'd be like your mortars, your machine gun units. They move just like infantry. 6 inches, 6 inches, 6 inches, no bogging check. Now, so that's something to remember. Basically, if they're men, whether man-packed or normal, 6 inches, period. They can move at the double, just like your vehicles can, so they go up to 12 inches. But again, they can't go through that terrain unless they got a special rule that says otherwise. So 6 inches. That's how far they're going to move for men. Now we're going to get into a little bit trickier. When we get to light guns, and this isn't a light gun, but it'll be like an artillery piece, maybe an anti-tank piece. And it'll say in its movement what type it is. Like I showed before, that was a standard tank movement. When we look at, let me get a thing here. So, I'm going to bring up that one page we looked at with the U.S. There we go. U.S. Arsenal. So, if we look at this again, it told us, like this Sherman moves as a standard tank. The Stuart moves as a light tank. So what I want to do is go to my gun teams, and you can see man-packed, 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 light, heavy, immobile, medium. So these gun teams is telling you again mobility. How does it move? And we're back to this chart then. So if it's a light gun, it's going to move like a person, except for it drops to that 4 inches, just like these vehicles did. They dropped when they got to rough terrain that's slow going, dropped to 4 inches. Well, so are these gun teams that are light. And again, cannot enter very difficult going and will require a bog check because it's got the wheels on it. So they're pushing this around. Not this one specifically, but you kind of get the idea. They'll be pushing this, will it get stuck? Medium and heavy guns, 4 inches straight across. And it's going to require a bogging check. Again, can't go in a very difficult going. That requires a skill check, like a building. And finally, in mobile guns, they cannot move, and that's where your transport is going to come into play. So it depends upon what transport you use. So, going back to this, cavalry, infantry, and man-pack gun teams are not affected by terrain on how far they can move, and requires no bogging check. When you start getting into the light, medium, heavy, and mobile guns, that's where your movement is going to change, and they will require a bogging check. Now, I already talked about the bogging check. Only the light, medium, and heavy gun teams need to worry about it, and if they're using a transport, if their transport requires a bogging check, that would be required. Again, cannot enter that very difficult terrain, even if this is towing this gun. This can't enter very difficult terrain. Even when it's being transported, or being towed, I have this backwards. Even when it's being towed by this tractor, it still can't enter very difficult terrain. So this gun, period, will not ever enter very difficult terrain, being towed or not. Now, you can take this, and I'm going to get my woods back out here. So let me zoom out. So here's my wonderful woods with my trees. You know what? This is a very densely packed forest here. So this is very difficult going. This is required that skill check to not be bogged. So these guys, very difficult. They can't even go in there. It's too thick. It's too rough. This cannot make it. However, if I won at the beginning of the game, I can start it in there, but it's going to stay there the whole game. It cannot move from that spot. Now, it can't even rotate. There's when we get to shooting, it'll be a part about rotating, unless it has a turntable. And like some 88.8, 88 flat guns have turntables on them, which lets it spin around in place. So that's allowed, but this one does not. It just sits there and points in that direction. So it can't even rotate unless you're on a turntable. And you can put these in a building. Remember, very difficult going. However, has to be on the ground floor. So it cannot be put up on the second floor. Ground floor only. That doesn't fit in there very well. So, these gun teams have restrictions on where they can go, but they can be placed in there. It's just that they're going to be stuck in there and you won't be able to move them at all after that. Just like the vehicles, when we talked about this linear terrain, and the vehicles can't stop on it, neither can your infantry. So the same rule applies there. This side or that side, it can't be like this. Now we talked about moving through gaps. So we had that road set up, and we had one building on one side, and a building on the other side. And my poor little Sherman here was destroyed in the middle of the road, blocking. And you're looking at this going, okay, I know I'm not supposed to take the base, but I know we take the width, because we couldn't take the base of this. We had to take the width of it. So what do we do with these men? Well, basically with men and man-pack gun teams, such as the mortar team or this machine gun team, those are man-packed. If it's a quarter of an inch or bigger, they can fit through. They're going to go through single file and then spread back out. So, looking at this side even, I think that's a quarter of an inch. They can squeeze through here and continue on their normal movement rate. You know what? even if they were going over this, they can continue their normal movement rate. The tricky part is when you try to enter a building that's contested, and we'll get to that. So in this situation, they could just go right over that. If this was impassable terrain, yeah, they can squeeze through there, or definitely squeeze through this side and continue on. And again, destroyed vehicles are considered linear terrain, so you can't stop on top of it. So if their movement rate's going to take them this far, they're going to have to stop before it. Then next turn, continue on. If a vehicle is being used for transport, so let me get these guys out of here again. And we'll bring out the forest. And this is a transport. I'll get to more about transports later in the video. But here's this transport, and oh gosh, what do you know? It got bogged down in its movement step. The next turn in the movement step, if you don't get that unbogged during the starting step, everybody in here can dismount and continue on. So if it's bogged down, and it not on the same turn it bogged down, but the following turn, if it doesn't get unbogged, your men can dismount and just move as normal. So just kind of letting you know that. Just because it's bogged down doesn't mean the men next turn have to stay in there and wait and wait and wait for that thing to get unbogged. When we get more into shooting, you'll understand more about concealed and bulletproof cover. But to let you know, men and man-packed gun teams. So that's why I said it was very important you understand the difference between a gun team and a man-packed gun team, because here's some of these special rules coming into play. And so we got this man-packed gun team and this gun team. If they don't move, and why I'm covering this is because this is part of movement. So if they don't move, they're considered concealed in the open. There's like pieces of grass, there rocks they can hide behind and all this, and makes them very tough for them to find. They're very small targets, so they can hide easily. This can't hide in the open. If it doesn't move, unless it's concealed by terrain you can actually see on the table, it's not concealed. These guys are concealed, and it makes it harder to hit them. That's what concealing does. So they're kind of hunkering down, they've gone down, they're hiding. So I just kind of want to cover that. That's one of the options you have with infantry. Instead of moving, you don't have to move, and they become concealed in the open, even though there's no terrain concealing them. So if an enemy was these guys, these Germans over here, trying to shoot at these guys are concealed because this terrain is between them, and it makes it harder for them to hit them. They're harder to hit. They have an easier time hitting them because they're right up against the wall and take away the concealing. And we'll get to that when we get to shooting. If I take this away and these guys have not moved, they're still concealed. Once they shoot, once they move, or once they do all that, they're not concealed anymore. So if they haven't moved, they're still concealed. Alright, there's another thing that infantry can do instead of moving. In man-packed gun teams, actually anybody could do this. It's called digging in. And basically what you're doing is just trying to create foxholes to help keep your guys a little more survivable. And what this is a skill check. So are they conscript, trained, or veteran? If you make that roll, they have dug in. Now, successful or not, they have considered to have moved for shooting purposes. And when we get to shooting, we'll talk more about what happens when you move. Normally your rate of fire goes down. So like we did with the tank, it gets 2 shots. If it moves, it gets 1. These guys were busy digging their hole, So their rate of fire is going to drop for that turn that they dug their hole. However, if they're part of an artillery unit that digs in, this artillery unit digs in, not them, this artillery dig in, they don't have that restriction. So if they successfully dig in, they can still do the artillery bombardment. If they do a straight shot, let's say they don't want to do an artillery bombardment but are trying to hit this tank here, their rate of fire is dropped. If they try to drop artillery shots on top of it, they get their full rate of fire, their normal rate. So that's kind of about digging in. And what it does is it helps protect your men. So infantry and man-packed gun teams, if they successfully dig in, they are concealed, which means they're harder to hit. They've gone down in their little foxholes. Also, it's what's called bulletproof cover, which means that it's even if they are hit and fell, they're saved. There's a possibility they still live because the sandbag or whatever, the dirt, the earth help protect them. If they fail, they're still concealed in the open because they technically didn't move. They're just down there, maybe prone, trying to dig their foxhole, and it was just too hard, it was rocky, couldn't do it. And so they are not in bulletproof cover, but are still concealed in the open. Light and medium gun teams, and I'm just going to throw this out here as an example. Other than anti-aircraft guns, they're concealed and also in bulletproof cover because they're smaller guns. Now, if you get to the heavy and immobile guns and light and medium anti-aircraft guns, they are not concealed because it's very hard to conceal that very big 88. However, if there's terrain between them, they still get that concealing for the terrain. So, but they don't get from digging in the concealment like the men do in the smaller guns. But they are in that bulletproof cover. So that would be one of the reasons you'd want to dig them in, is even if they are hit and they fail, they're saved, there's a possibility that they still live with that bulletproof cover. Now, a dug-in team. So here we go. These guys are dug in. Just throw some out here. Okay, so these guys are dug in. Got my marker on it. Remember, mark what's going on. They cannot move out of that spot. If they start moving out, they're no longer dug in. The ones that moved out are no longer dug in. So if he moves, these two are still dug in. He's not. Until next turn, he can try to do dig back in. If they rotate, they're still dug in. So you can rotate, you just can't move anywhere. There's one other thing I want to cover, and I kind of want to cover it when we get to assault, but I'm going to do it right now. These guys are coming in to assault these guys dug in. They go in, attack some. They are now getting ready to do a counter assault. So if they leave their spot there, what you do is you just mark where each of them were at. So this one was here, this one was here, and this one. And they leave their foxhole to, they were defending, they were assaulted. These guys started the assault, came in. These guys are leaving, coming out to assault. They successfully defeated them. If they can make it back with the consolidation move, they're still dug in. If this one happened to be way up here and can only make it here and didn't make it back to a spot, it is not dug in. So I just kind of want to cover that, since we're kind of talking about the digging in and moving. And that was one of the ways you can talk about the ways you can lose it, which was moving, or if you're defending from an assault and you can't make it back, you lose that dug in. Now, what I want to talk about is moving into a building. Now, we talked about tank. You know, it just kind of goes crashing into there. Infantry, it's a little different. So we got this building, and there's what's called contested and uncontested building. Uncontested building would be one of their friendly teams. It could be from their platoon or one, you know, it could be that in there. It's from their same company is in there. That's checked. So that building, they can go in. Fine. They can move in. However, if it is empty, there's nobody in there, or if an enemy team is in here, it's called contested. And what I really needed to do is get the longer building for this one. So let me bring out the church. So right now, nobody in there. We talked about that. These guys, this is an unchecked building. To see if it's safe to enter, so they're looking around, is anybody in there? It's again that skill level, conscript, trained, veteran. So they're looking in this window. Remember, it has to be an opening, maybe this door. And these guys are trained, so it's a 4+. And let's see what they got. They got a 6. So now they were successful. They can enter this building if they have movement rate left, and the rest of their platoon can enter if they have movement rate left, and anybody else in the company can now go in that building. It's been checked. Now they can go in. However, the bad guys are in there. So Germans are in there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring this in so we can kind of see down in to it a little bit to see what's going on. All right. When they go in, they can go in, but these guys have to be at least 2 inches away. So I can't just plop them in there. We still have to keep that 2 inches away. Now, let's say they were checking this building. It's empty. And they roll. Let's see if I can do it. No, I'll just put it. Nope, I didn't. Okay. So, and they rolled a 2. So, they did make their check. What's basically happening is they're blocking this entrance from any of the other teams going in there. Let me move this back just a little bit since we know nobody's in there. So that means this next group can try to enter one of these. So, they're from the same platoon. He can check. Oh, got a 1. So he can't enter. Well, now this guy's going to try. So they come up to this one. They basically have blocked these 2 entrances because look how wide their base is. The rule kind of is if the team's base, that's their base, if the team's base is wider than the opening, they block any further attempts to get in there. If the opening is wider than their base, which I don't see any of these openings being like that, but if the opening is wider than the team's base, another team can try to enter through that opening, but then it would probably be blocked after that. So now, this third team out of this platoon of, there's some more waiting to get in here. They don't make it in there. I don't know if they're going to make it. And, oh, he got a 6. So that means he can continue in and use his normal movement rate from where he started at. So as long as he doesn't go over 6 inches. And the rest of these can start piling in too, up to their normal movement rate. Next turn, this is checked. So next turn, these guys can go in there. Now you're like, oh man, I don't want to have to do this check. Well, one of the ways you can do it is if you have somebody at start of movement step already at the window of the building, you can automatically enter. If you move up to the building, you have to do a check if it's an unchecked building. If you already started your movement step and you're next to in that opening, you can enter the building. When leaving the building and entering, I guess I should have said that. On entering, and actually this other building would be good for that. There we go. You can only enter and exit through a bottom floor. So you can't enter and exit through a top floor. So you're like, oh, okay. Well, he blocked that window, but he didn't block this one. Nope, you can't enter through that top floor. You have to do the bottom floor. Now, moving up and down floors on a building, as you notice, this one has 2 floors. 1, 2. You can do your normal movement rate into there, and you get bonus movement. So infantry and those man-packed gun teams can move up and down a total of 2 floors during the movement, in addition to their normal movement. So if he moved into this building and that took 6 inches of movement, he can still move up here, and it won't count against him. So you can move up or down. So if he's here and wants to leave, he can go down for free and then continue moving. So that's a little bonus when you're moving, going up and down floors. Now that's infantry and man-packed gun teams only. Now, if you notice, there's no stairs or anything between these. So if there's no representation of stairs, just pretend there's a ladder between the floors or rubble that leads to another opening, so you just go up and down wherever you want in the building. That's not going to be a big deal in this game. All right. Now we're going to move. This is we're kind of done with infantry movement. Like I said, infantry movement's not very difficult. They don't get bogged down by terrain, except for, well, not bogged down, but yeah, they don't. But impassable terrain doesn't bother, or impassable is the only terrain that bothers them. They can't enter impassable terrain. The building checks was one thing I needed to cover, and also about being concealed in the open and digging in. So now we're going to head to transports. Now, there's different types of transports. There's this kind, and it'll tell you on your briefings about the transports. Now, transports can carry infantry and man-packed gun teams. See, there's that man-packed gun teams keeps popping up. And that's why I went over teams first, because it make this much easier to understand. So we got man-packed gun teams and infantry. As you notice, they got a lot in common going on here. Even though they are a gun team, they act a lot like infantry. So they can carry these infantry as passengers. And they will only carry infantry and man-packed gun teams from their own platoon. And you wonder, well, what does that mean? So let me go back to one of these, and we're just going to go down the. We looked at this heavy machine gun when we were looking at teams. So here's a heavy machine gun. If you notice, you get this and these 4 heavy machine guns. So you get the leader. Zoom in just a little bit so it's a little easier. So you get the command carbine team and these 4 M1917 HMGs, heavy machine guns. Now you can add in bazookas if you want to, because we talked about this stuff. You can add in over here. But also, you notice they have these jeeps that are kind of grayed in. That's the transports. So you can zoom these guys. They don't have to walk. They can get in a jeep and run somewhere. So it says here, like, add jeep with, let's see, yeah, add jeep with 50 caliber anti-aircraft machine gun, and jeeps with trailers for 10 points for the platoon. So for 10 extra points, you get all these other vehicles. So these Jeeps will only, this Jeep and this Jeep will only pick up these guys. These two Jeeps will only pick up these guys. This Jeep will only pick up that. And they will not pick up anybody from this platoon. This one will only carry him. So that's what they mean by that. Only carry teams from their own platoon. So these Jeeps here will not carry anybody else except for these guys. Now, if one of these gets destroyed, the teams that is dedicated to that one can be distributed out. So if you do start losing like these two, well, these guys can start going into these other vehicles as you start losing, if the vehicle can hold them, because the vehicle's going to hold so much. Now, on like a half track or something like that. So this, and I'm going to go out here, a little easier to see. This can hold 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 teams can fit into one of those. However, if their transport is to also tow the big gun here, let's just say that is, one team has to go away. So then it's only 5 teams and the gun. So it's 6 teams or 5 teams and the gun. And they can only tow one of these guns. So per vehicle, 1 tow. So I can't put 2 of these guns behind this. So 6, 5. Now, one thing I'm going to say, there's something to remember. You don't run into these too often, but just something to remember. Pioneer, supply, ammo, demolition carrier, and recovery vehicles cannot carry passengers. And these items, these same vehicles will come up later in another rule. Now, our independent and warrior teams, which I talked about in the other one, can use any transport capable of carrying from any platoon. So even though this transport's dedicated to them, if this is my HQ, my first in command, my company command team, he can go, oh, I need that transport. Or he can jump in with them if there's room. Or he can just, I'm going to take this transport and use it. If he's using it, they can't. Unless this stops and they get on and continues. Now, even though this is now carrying all these men, it is still allowed to go within 2 inches of another vehicle. They don't stop the rule about being 2 inches closer. Because remember, vehicles can just be right next to each other. It's the infantry and vehicles that are in man-pack gun teams and gun teams and vehicles that you can't go within 2. They don't stop that. So the Stug can pull right up to it. And that's no problem there. So, and basically these guys are really just taken off the table and set to the side, and you can mark the vehicle or them and let them know who's in what vehicle. So this is normally what you're going to see anyway. It's a vehicle. If it has tank escorts, they may not carry any passengers because they're carrying the tank escorts on their vehicle. Just kind of let you know about that little rule. Now, how do guys mount into a vehicle to go somewhere? So we got our vehicle, we've got our men, and these men are out here. rule is this their transport vehicle has to be within 4 inches of somebody in their team. I mean, it can be there, just can't go on top. So, I mean, it can be right next to them. Just has to be within 4 inches of any of them. So we're going to put it like in the middle here. Now, if they can reach the vehicle, they can get in. They can even move at the double, and I'll get to something about that in just a minute. But if they can reach the vehicle, they can mount, and it's where they'll be sitting. Can they reach where they'll be sitting? So it isn't can they reach the front of the vehicle, because they're not going to sit on the front here and ride. They're going to be going back here. So can they reach this back part? Well, infantry moves 6 inches, so I think all these guys can make it. So basically, you just take them all off. They're in that vehicle. Set the guys to the side. You can mark it with a 1 and them with a 1. So put a 1 in here if you want to. I mean, maybe you even do like this. Like, oh, this is unit 5. And then you set a 5 next to all those guys over, like over here. To kind of let you, remind you, because if you're running around 4 or 5 of these, well, who's in what vehicle? You know, because you may split these guys up, 2 in this one, 2 in that one, and this one has their mortar team. This one has their commander. So it's important to know which one he's in and which one he's in, because this may get killed off, or this may get killed off. And it's very important that we know specifically which vehicle it is, because if this vehicle gets hit, we have to know it's these guys that are in there. So it's very, very important that you know who's in which vehicle. So they're in that vehicle. Now, if the transport has not moved this turn, it was just brought in, plopped in here. It's called brought from the front, or from the back, whatever. So it's brought in, boom, men jump in. This can now move as its normal vehicle rate. Even though the men moved, it can still move its normal movement rate. Now, if none of the men moved at the double to get in that vehicle, this can move at the double. But, you know, there's about, do you really want to do that? I talked about that in that one video. If the men were out here, so now the men are back out here, the transport was up here. It used its movement rate to get in here. These guys can pile on or pile in. This cannot move. It already moved at that turn. So it once it moves, it can't move again. Now, dismounting, it's pretty much the same process. If this does not move, the men can get out and move their normal movement rate, wherever they want to go, from this back compartment where they'll be sitting. They're not going to be up in the front, so don't think about measuring from here up. It's measuring from back here, because that's where they're seated. And they're going to get out. So all the men got out, and this is as far as they went. The vehicle's empty. Remember I talked about transport teams, how they normally don't stay on the table? Oh, it's empty. It's taken off. If this vehicle has these guys in it, so we put the 5 back up there to show that they're in it. This vehicle's here. It moves up there. Nobody can get out of it. Once the vehicle moves, nobody can get out of it. Again, here comes those vehicles with the exceptions. Pioneer, supply, ammo, demolition carrier, or recovery transports, or even if they're empty, are never sent. What's called sent to the rear. When this transport was empty and those guys were all out here, it was sent to the rear. It's set off to the side. If it gets destroyed, it's out for the rest of the game. Just kind of let you know. So you don't have unlimited transports. But if it's full, if men are in it, it's on the table. If nobody's in it, it's not on the table. If it's on the table, it's fair game to be destroyed. Now there is something called transport platoons. And I really couldn't find an example. I know I've seen them before. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to that rifle company we've been looking at. And I'll just kind of point out where I saw it. And it was down in, it was a box like this. And I think it said like transport up here. So it's its own little box. It isn't like one of these that's part of this unit. It's its own little box to transport. And that's called a transport platoon. And they operate as their own platoon. And they're special because they can carry anybody. They're there, hey, we're here to move people around. Who needs to go somewhere? That's what they're used for. So they can carry any platoon. They can carry these guys. They can carry the heavy machine gun team. Oh, you know what? I have a mortar squad I need to have moved around. So let's bring that transport in. Let's load up. Alright, let's go, guys. So there are some units that do have transport platoons to buy that you can use for your whole army. There is also another type of transport that a lot of people don't know about, and that's this. Yes, you can throw men on your tanks. So I'm going to have these 3 tanks. And these 6 men are sitting out here. And they can ride these tanks. The same rules apply. If they moved, and then these guys get on, they don't get to move. Or they can't. So what you do is you have to split up evenly, best you can, the men. Now the most a tank can hold is 3 stands. However, it looks like I can get 2 stands per tank. And again, this is going to be important that you know where he's at. It's going to be very important because if this tank gets hit, you might lose this. If this tank gets hit, you're not going to lose him. So again, you might mark, well, this is unit 4, so set these to the side and put a 4. This is my infamous 5 group, so they're going to have a 5. And again, these guys are off the gaming table, off to the side. But it's to remind you that, hey, they're in there. And you know what? These are the skull guys. So they're going to get the skull. They're very deadly. So you can have guys ride tanks. There's some benefits to it, like the movement and all that, but then there's some penalties. If the tank gets hit, you might lose your men. So just kind of let you know. You can ride the tanks, and it's mounting and dismounting just like a normal transport. There is one tank, though, that none of these men will ever get on, and that's a flame-throwing tank. They will never ride a flame-throwing tank. And if they have tank escorts, they cannot have men jump on them. They're already filled with men with the tank escorts. Tank escorts, there's guys riding on the tank, helping protect the tank. And let's see. Last thing I'm going to talk about is, I already talked about sending stuff to the rear. If it's empty, except for those vehicles I talked about earlier, the Pioneer, Supply, Ammo, Demolition Carrier, and Recovery vehicles are always on the table. If your transport comes our famous woods. So our transport gets bogged down. I think I might have already talked about this. I think I did. No, just in case I didn't, I forgot if I talked about it or not. If it's bogged down, the next turn, yeah, I think I did. They can jump out if you don't get this unbogged in the starting step. My notes here, I got it down twice for some reason. However, you can send this to the rear. Oh, this is one part I didn't talk about. If you send this to the rear and it was bogged down, so it's empty, it's no longer bogged down or bailed out. So if you bring it back, this turn or next, of course the men won't be able to jump back into it because they moved, but now it's unbogged. So that was the thing about that note. All right. Now, bringing transports forward, which means you're going to put the transport out here. There is a few rules. So this transport's coming out here to pick up these guys to take them to another part of the battlefield quickly. Now, the rules about this is, I already talked about it, has to be within 4 inches of somebody on that team. I mean, it could be clear over here as long as you're within 4 inches of this, of their platoon they're going to be picking up. May not be within 16 inches of any enemy team within line of sight unless it's concealed by terrain. So I have the Germans. Actually, a tank's going to be a little easier to see. So I got this tank up here. Oh, that is just way, way too close. No way that transport's going to go out there and get fried. They aren't that brave. They need these for other things, so it's like, there's a tank up there. Forget it. I'm just going to get shot. However, if this gets concealed by terrain, there's that fence giving the concealment, he can go in there. However, even though we're concealed by terrain, it can't be within 4 inches, so let's just move that back. So now it's safe. Not safe, safe, not safe. So within 4 of somebody from the team, not within 16 of an enemy that can see you unless concealed by terrain. But then again, not even 4 inches. So there's that 4 inches here, 4 inches there. And may not be brought within 8 inches of any reconnaissance teams. And there's reconnaissance teams you can buy. They have little special abilities. So if this is a reconnaissance vehicle, still can't bring that in, even though concealed by terrain. They're little special little guys. So even if you're concealed by terrain, within 8 inches of a recon, can't do it. Unless you see that on it. Oh, it's bogged down. Or it's bailed out, which we'll get to in shooting. If it's one of those two and it's a recon team, you just ignore it. It could be right here. And it's bogged down on the fence. It's trying to come in there to those men. Those men want to get out of there. Concealed by, well, it's a little bit back because if it's right up next to the fence, you can't get concealed. So now it's concealed. But wait, this is recon. Oh wait, they're bogged down. So this is okay. So one last time. Within 4. Not within 16. Okay, now we're okay. Not within 4. And if this is a recon, not within 8, unless bogged down or bailed out. There it is. It's one of those two. Now, if you bring the vehicle forward, they cannot shoot in a shooting step or assault. So basically, they just came in, they're kind of disorganized a little bit, and they're just going on. However, they can move in those steps if allowed, like the Stormtrooper move for Germany allows a little bit of movement in the assault step. So if this was Germany, they could. do that little extra movement. But can't shoot, can't assault when you first come in. Okay, next one is about towing vehicles. Or not towing vehicles, towing guns. With these. Get that go that way. So, got this, and it's going to be pulled by this tractor around the table. So, light, medium, heavy, and mobile gun teams are towed behind their transport team. Some light gun teams can be pushed, but if they have a transport, which you can buy that transport, they got that, you can tow them with that. It'll go further, or it'll go faster. As far as when to bring this out, it's the same as a transport. Same rules apply. You want to limber this up, it's the same rules as men getting on this tank. Or this tank. Onto this, well, it's considered a tank in this game for game purposes. But, well, this transport. But loading and unloading, same rules apply here. It can only do one, though. So it has to be within, you just pop it up there normally right up next to it. You got to watch that distance thing, within 4, not within 8 of a recon and all that. And if it hasn't moved, it can move. And these stay together as one. It's considered one. So if this gets shot, this is all considered a transport team. So if this isn't concealed, it can be shot at. There is no separate bogging check because they're towing this. Just remember, this can never go in very difficult terrain, so this cannot go in very difficult terrain when towing this. Jeeps and motorcycles, when they're towing a vehicle, can only move 8 inches on roads and cross country. So their movement rate drops from that wonderful 16 inches down to 8. Only certain countries will have where they use a Jeep. Now, when this gets to where it's going to go, remember, if it's moving, people can't dismount. So, next turn, it's here. This is sent to the rear. This now has not been considered. It has not considered to have moved. Let me double check something. I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. I'm just making sure that I was clear on this rule before I said it. When it unlimbers, so we sent that the tractor to the rear, it has not considered to have moved. So you can do your artillery shot, get your full rate of fire, and stuff like that. It's just that when you tow it where you want it to go, make sure you're pointed where you want it to point to. And I think that's all I really got on movement. Covered a lot there. Infantry is pretty simple. It was just throwing in the gun teams and the transports. I was really hoping to do transports on a separate video, but when I realized that these gun teams were going to start using transports, I might as well just throw it in this video too. So I'll see what I'm going to head to next, what rules may be shooting. I think there was command next, was the next section. So I don't know if I'm going to go to command or I'm going to go to shooting. So we'll just see. So until next time. Have a good game. Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot one thing. It has to do with going through gaps, and that's with gun teams. Of course, you don't do the base, and there's more here than min, so you can't do the 1/4 of an inch. What they say is, really just, they'll bring these, what they call trails in, so you're really just going to look at the width of the tires here, and will that fit through the gap? If it can, like, oh, this one definitely can. It will fit through the gap. These 2 tires right through there, will not over there. So that's what I forgot with the gun teams, was going through the gap. Don't look at the base. Don't look at I guess they're called trails sticking out here. Look at this width, like where the tires are at. And that's going to tell you whether or not you can go through. So that is finally all I've got for this video. So have a good game.